Well, hello again. I'm Tony Baker, pastor of Church in the Village here at Shepherd Village, and we're back with another segment with Eric Tappenden, the owner of Chapel Ridge Funeral Homes. We're so glad to have Eric with us again, Eric, and so good to have you back. We've talked a lot in the last couple of segments about prearranging funerals and whether we should bury or whether we should cremate, what happens to the money when we give it to you in trust, and you've told us how it's safe and how we don't have to pay any extras if there's a funeral. If the costs go up, we don't have to pay more. If the costs go down, we get a refund.
Yep.
And we can take it to the grave with us. So, talking about cost, just one quick thing. You have been so gracious to us here at Shepherd Village, and we know that you offer a specific discount to some of our people here. Could you tell us about that discount?
So first of all, before I touch on that, the research shows that when people prearrange, on average they spend 10% less than when they wait until the time of death, because they have a chance to kind of think things through in a unstressed, unemotional time, and they get time to think through their options and choices. And so they make sensible, reasonable, informed choices. When we entered into a partnership with Shepherd Village about 15 years ago, we said at the time we would like to offer a discount to not only residents, but the residents' families, and to the staff and their families at Shepherd Village. And so we have done that, and we've had, in that 15 years, hundreds of people prearrange and prepay with us, which we're very grateful for. We're grateful for that relationship. But we offer a 20% discount to people from Shepherd Village, anybody with a Shepherd Village connection, and we're delighted to do that.
That's wonderful, wonderful. That's very reassuring. And so you've helped out Shepherd Village in many ways like that. We're so grateful to have that relationship with Chapel Ridge as well. Now, I was thinking in our last segment that we talked about if somebody prearranges, it's all looked after and everything like that. But what if somebody moves from Ontario and perhaps goes to live in Nova Scotia, and they've already prearranged with you? So how do they handle their funeral? And likewise, what if somebody living in Nova Scotia prearranged with a funeral home there now came to live in Ontario? What happens there?
So they are transferable. It's important to know that when you prepay with Chapel Ridge, it's not Chapel Ridge's money. We don't actually see the funds until the death occurs and we've done the funeral. So it remains the money that belongs to the person who's arranged, or their family, or their estate, and you can transfer that anytime, anywhere. The first time this came up was somebody had prearranged with me, and they moved to Montreal, and they moved. It was a mom and then 2 adult children, and they had all prearranged with us. And they said, we'd like to transfer it because we're planning on staying in Montreal. And so we arranged for that to be transferred. They went to a funeral home in Montreal where some friends knew, and they initiate the transfer. The money stays in the same place. The money's still held by the same trust company or insurance company, but it's just reassigned to a new funeral home, and then they enter into a contract with that funeral home. We've had that happen the other way around. Even within the city here, we've had people who have prearranged at another funeral home but decide they want to do their funeral with us, and so it's very easy. There's a 1-page form you fill out, and it just reassigns the benefit to the other funeral home. What happens is when you transfer, you lose the guarantee of the price. And so if somebody prearranged with us and they get a discount and then they move to Nova Scotia, the funeral home there may not honor the price that we contracted with. So what happens is whenever we get a request to transfer, we always say, we'll help you find a funeral home that will honor our prices. And we can usually do that. Yeah. We can do that. We've had that happen in BC. We had a lady who lived in Markham, and she was like 91, and her son got a new job in Vancouver, and so they decided they were going to move there. They were taking Mom with them, and she said, I'm going to have to transfer my funeral. And I said, well, is your son for sure going to stay in Vancouver? And she said, well, it looks like it. So we transferred her funeral to a Vancouver funeral home. 3 years later, her son got transferred back to Toronto. And she said, she was 94 at this point. She says, I want to transfer my funeral back to Chapel Ridge again. And so we did that. And so it's fairly easy to do that. And it usually means you don't lose anything if the funeral home's helpful.
It's flexible.
It's
there's a lot
very
of flexibility.
flexible.
That's
Yep.
good. I got another interesting topic. As you may know, Margaret and I were serving as global workers overseas in India for several
Yes.
years and Southeast Asia. We had a wonderful time, but we're living in a third world country. And when we first got to India, I was, after about a year, I think, I came down with a terrible illness. It was called chikungunya, and it's very much like dengue fever.
Ooh.
And I was very, very sick. It was so bad I would sit out in the heat of the day in the sun, and I would be wearing a blanket and shivering. And I lost about 35, 40 pounds. I didn't eat for 2 weeks. And the question came up with my wife. You know, before we went overseas, they told us, they get us through all this introduction, how, you know, you're be qualified, your mental ability to get in and look after people, and how good you were. So you qualified, you go through psychiatric assessments. She says, but they never told us what would happen if one of us dies.
Yeah.
If we had prearranged a funeral with you and I had died in India,
Yep.
what would happen? How would I get back? How would my wife bring my body back to Canada to get
Yep.
rid of me? Not get rid of me, bury me.
So when that happens, it's usually an incredibly upsetting and stressful thing. We had, in fact, one of the former board members here at Shepherd Village was on a river cruise with his wife, and they were in, I forget the name of the river, but they were in Bucharest, Romania, and she died there. And he was beside himself. He didn't know what to do. They had not prearranged, and we helped them go through the steps of shipping the body back home, but it was very upsetting. I remember him saying at the time, the funeral home over here, they found a funeral home where somebody could speak English, but he said they will only accept cash. And I said, well, I know you, so I'll wire you the money if you need cash to get home. In the end, they took a credit card or something, but it was very, very difficult for them. And it took a couple of weeks with all the bureaucracy to get her home. The insurance company that we work with to hold prepaid funds offers a thing that they used to call it the Worldwide Travel Plan. They now call it Journey Home. And basically it says this: if you die anywhere in the world, they'll bring your body home for free, period. You pay a one-time fee. Right now it's, I think, $595, and you pay it once. It lasts you for the rest of your life. You don't pay it every time you travel or every year. You just pay it once, and it's good for the rest of your life. So the younger you are, the better deal it is. And not only do they cover the cost of bringing the body home, but they do all the work. And to me, that's the real benefit of it. We've had other situations, you know, where a guy I knew who was quite young, 67 years old, died of a heart attack snorkeling off the British Virgin Islands on a trip. And it was terrible to try to get his body back home. It was in the islands, and, you know, it was kind of like, well, tomorrow's fine, you know, not just, next week is fine, 2 weeks. So and they didn't have a pathologist on the island, but they insisted that a pathologist come and do an autopsy and all this stuff. So the Journey Home plan not only covers the cost, and the average cost, by the way, of bringing a body from one continent to another today is about $12,000 to $15,000. And most travel insurance that you buy, you know, for medical travel insurance has a body repatriation clause that covers $5,000. The problem with that too is not only does it not cover enough, but they would also say, well, you know, Mrs. Baker, you go and find a funeral home, and Maybe they speak English, maybe they don't. You go and find one, and you contract with them to prepare Tony's body and put him in a casket and a shipping container, and you arrange with the airline. You do all that work, and then if Tony wasn't suffering from a pre-existing condition, we'll reimburse you $5,000 when you come home. So those plans are not very helpful. This plan, there's a 1-800 number, there's a long-distance number that's answered here in Toronto by a company called McKinnon and Bowes, who we know as the shipping experts. And they'll answer the phone, and you just have to say, here's our policy number, here's where we are, please come and get them and bring them home. And they look after it. They have a global network of funeral homes everywhere in the world. They would work with the airlines, and then we would go, our funeral home would go to the airport to meet the casket, and then the prearranged funeral would happen.
It's
a really
reassuring,
good plan.
very reassuring. So you obviously offer that to all of your clients when they're
Yes.
signing up for the prearrangement.
Yep.
Now, what if a client signed up with you some time ago when that wasn't in place? Has that been in place all the time, or is it?
No, but it's been around for 20 years, and you can buy that. If you have a prearranged funeral with us or with anyone, you can buy that
can add that
independently.
on.
You can add it on.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a one-time fee, and you can get it just added on, absolutely.
Good. One last question. Prearranging. We said it's mostly the person themselves that prearranges their own funeral. We've got people here in their 80s and 90s that have not prearranged, and I know, and they're sane, they're not dementia.
Yeah.
And you've got people in their 30s and 40s that prearrange. What is the average age of somebody that prearranges? Is it somebody, a young adult that's thinking smart for the future, or is it a senior who's, oh, I'm going to die next year, I better do something now?
We have people in that whole range. So, I had someone last week, in fact, it was a grandma who was prearranging for her adult children and for herself and for her adult children's children.
Oh my God.
I looked at one of the applications and it was a 5-year-old.
Oh.
And I said to the funeral director who arranged it, I said, really? And she said, the grandma was quite earnest. She insisted that the whole family was going to be prearranged, and they took a 20-year time payment plan, so it was like $40 a month or something to cover this little 5-year-old. To me, that's different, but you know what? It's whatever a family wants, we'll do it. The average age for us, we track this, so I know exactly what the average age is. Last year it was 66. So we have people from their 90s, right down to, in fact, we did a prearranged funeral for somebody who was 101 this last week. You would recognize the name if I told you. And right down to, young adults in their 30s who say, you know what, I don't want my family, if anything happened to me unexpectedly, I don't want them to have to worry about it. So, and once you finish paying for it, it's paid for. So you don't pay, it's not like life insurance where you pay for the rest of your life, and if you stop your payments, you're not covered anymore.
So the moral of the story is get in early, plan way ahead, just like we always say to people, plan ahead.
Yeah.
Get in early, you're going to get the rock bottom price. No matter what's going to happen, you could live for another 50, 60 years, and you're covered.
Exactly.
That's called planning, isn't it?
Yep.
That's called planning.
Yep.
And one last question, Eric.
Yes.
We've been talking about pre-planning here, specifically in Ontario, but you've covered the rest of Canada. We said they can pre-plan in Nova Scotia, you can do it in Montreal. What about people that don't live in Canada or Ontario? Maybe like my family, my son lives in Nevada. I have a sister in the UK. Is there pre-planning worldwide, or is it just specific to Western countries? Or
Many, many countries around the world that I'm familiar with offer pre-planning. I know that, for example, if you live in the Philippines, you can pre-plan there. It's a very common thing to be done there. Certainly in the United States, everywhere in the United States, this is very, very common. And in fact, the insurance company that they use in the United States is the same company we use here. It's a Canadian division that we use up here. It's called True Stage Life of Canada. And their head office is in the United States. in Madison, Wisconsin, I think. So this is available all through the United States and in many other parts of the world.
Good. Well, thank you. That's
Okay.
great. Good to know. Eric, it's been so good talking to you. And again, we so much appreciate you here at Shepherd Village. We consider you part of our family, in fact. So, we wish you all the best for your future. And thank you so much again for being with us.
It's been my pleasure, Tony. Thank you for having me.